In 2012, Google wanted to work out what the formula was for what made a team successful. They kicked off a huge project codenamed Aristotle, involving statisticians, psychologists, sociologists, engineers, and researchers. They started out looking at the existing literature, but then they looked inside Google and they scrutinized hundreds of teams, trying to find what the patterns were that could explain why some teams were so much more successful than others. In this video, I'm going to explain what they found and how you can make use of those learnings. Hey, how's it going? This is Scruffy Leadership, a YouTube channel about management and leadership. My name's Ben, and I've been a leader and a manager in the tech industry for over 25 years. At first, the researchers in Project Aristotle struggled to find any patterns at all. They took all the conventional wisdom about what made teams successful, such as seniority of team members, size of team, whether the team were located all in one office or not, whether team members were introverts or extroverts, and how well each individual member of the team performed, and they tried to find correlations between those factors and team's effectiveness, but it basically looked random. So they would find two instances of teams that were, according to all the measures they were using, basically identical, which had wildly different outcomes. So then they shifted away from this conventional wisdom and they started looking at what people in the teams might have called unwritten rules or culture, and which the researchers called norms. And this is where the researchers started to find patterns. 2 years after the project had started, they were finally able to reveal the 5 factors that made the difference between the most effective teams and the rest. And here they are. Number 1, psychological safety. So you may have already seen 1 or 2 of the videos I've made on this subject, but in case you haven't, let me tell you what psychological safety is and why it deserves its spot in first place on Project Aristotle's list. A psychologically safe team is one in which people are not afraid to express their views, to disagree, and say no to their leadership. In contrast, in an environment that lacks psychological safety, people are afraid that if they say the wrong thing, they will be punished or ridiculed. And the result of this is that people agree with their boss or their loudest colleague, and when that person gets it wrong, no one's willing to point it out, even if it's obvious to everybody. In contrast, in teams with good psychological safety, disagreements get aired and discussed, people raise concerns before they become serious issues, and leadership gets to hear what people in their team really think. Number 2 is dependability. Another way to say this is that in effective teams, people get things done. If someone says they're going to do something, they do it, and they do it when they say they're going to do it. Now, notice that when the Project Aristotle researchers tried to find a correlation between individual performance and overall team effectiveness, they basically couldn't find one. But when they looked at whether team members were dependable or not within that team, they did. So dependability is not the same as performance. For example, in a team that really understands each individual's strengths, no one gets asked to do something they aren't capable of doing. And conversely, in a team with one superstar, that superstar's low dependability might mean that their overall high performance can't make up for the fact that the way they work doesn't help their teammates to be more effective. Number 3, structure and clarity. It's really important that members of a team know why they're in that team, why the team exists, and what's expected of them. This means that members of the team have clarity about the team's overall goals and about their own goals, and about the role that they and everyone else plays in the team. And notice again, this isn't really about the innate capability of the individual members of the team, but rather how the team's norms and behaviors lead to a setup that enables everyone to be as effective as possible within the team. And also note that it's not just important that each person understands what is expected of them, but that they understand what role everyone else in the team plays. And I'd like to add to that a key feature I often see missing is a lack of respect and understanding for different disciplines. So if your team, for example, has engineers, product managers, project managers, and designers, it's important that every one of those disciplines is respected and explicitly acknowledged as being critical to the success of the team's overall goals. It makes me really sad when I see teams in which there's a sense, either explicit or implicit, that, for example, engineers are the kings and queens of the team, and everyone else is just there to support them by carrying out something that the engineers don't really need to know about. I'm not saying that everyone should understand in minute detail all the jobs that everyone else does, but I do think it's important that we all have a healthy respect for the roles we don't do, and I think this is just as important as understanding our own role. Number 4, meaning. The Project Aristotle research showed that there's a clear correlation between team performance and the sense of purpose that the members of the team have. In other words, a personal reason for being there, a reason it matters to them. This might be as simple as paying the bills or providing for their family, or it might be about the ability they have to use their particular skills to help their teammates. Again, this ties in with number 3. If a member of a team feels that the rest of the team doesn't really value their work and wouldn't miss them if they were gone, that's very likely to undermine their effectiveness. And finally, impact. And again, this is related to number 4, but instead of it being about an internal personal sense of purpose, It's about a belief that the work of the team matters to someone outside of the team, to another part of the organization, or to the company as a whole, or perhaps to the whole world. When team members don't feel this, when they don't really feel like their work matters, it's much harder for them to be truly engaged with the work. And this can lead to lower overall effectiveness of the team. So given these 5 principles, what can you do differently? Well, you can start by asking yourself, for each of these 5 principles, to what extent are they already true in your team? If you're brave, you can ask the same question of the members of your team, but only do that if you really plan to act on their feedback. Okay, so let's run through the 5 of them in turn. Psychological safety first. I have a whole video on this subject, which I'll link in the description below, but the short answer is to be thoughtful about how you respond to things you don't like. If someone in your team disagrees with you or expresses a concern, monitor how you react. If you get visibly irritated or even angry with them, you're creating poor psychological safety. And by the way, if no one in your team ever does express disagreement with you or concerns, then you've probably already got really bad psychological safety. Fixing that isn't easy, but it's not impossible. Okay, second, dependability. It might seem like this is something inherent in the members of your team and out of your control, and to some extent that is true. But it is also possible to instill a sense in your team of the importance of dependability. Start by modeling it yourself. If you say you're going to do something, do it. Praise people when they exhibit this trait. Call it out explicitly as an important factor in what makes your team work. Don't berate people publicly for not being dependable, but do highlight to them why it matters and what you expect them to do differently next time. Here's the thing, the main finding of Project Aristotle was that it's not so much the qualities of the individuals in the team that matters as the norms and culture that that team develops. So none of it is entirely out of your control. Structure and clarity. This one should be easy, but in practice it does take work. The easy bit is starting out by making sure you know what everyone else's role is. If there's anyone whose role is unclear to you, you need to fix that. If you're clear on everyone's role, make sure they are too. And find out if you all agree on the goals of the team and the project. So ask people, what do you think is the goal of our project? Or why do you think our team exists? And see what they say. You might get fairly varied answers, in which case there's probably some work for you to do. Another part of this is making sure that everyone understands why their role is important to the team and to the project, but also why everyone else's role matters too. If your engineers think your product manager is not needed, that's probably something for you to fix, for example. Fourth is meaning, and I think this can be addressed in a couple of ways. You can help each individual find their own meaning if they don't already have it, and you can create a culture in which talking about this meaning is encouraged. If one person shares the reason they get up in the morning, it can be an uplifting experience for everyone else, but it can also encourage them to think more deeply about their own sense of meaning. And the same goes for the 5th factor, impact. You start with yourself. Do you believe that the work you do really matters? If not, see if you can find a purpose. Someone, somewhere, must surely benefit from your work. Who are they? How do they benefit? If you really can't find a way to care about it, then perhaps you're leading the wrong team or you need to pick a new project. But personally, in my experience at least, I found that even with projects that seem quite meaningless at first glance, I've always been able to find a way to believe in the importance of the impact of my work. And once you've found that sense of impact for yourself, you need to find a way to match that purpose with the values of the members of your team. Now, for some people, this might just prove to be impossible, in which case they really might want to find a different team. But once again, if you believe in it yourself, I'd be willing to bet you can find a way to help most people in your team believe in it too. And of course, if you're in a position to choose the projects your team works on, you can start by involving your team in these decisions as much as you can so that you can align the goals of the projects you work on with your team members' values. Before they did Project Aristotle, Google ran Project Oxygen, which started out trying to prove whether managers were needed at all or not, and ended up identifying the 8 properties or so that make for a really effective leader. If you haven't seen it already, check out my video on Project Oxygen. It's on screen now. And if you have any thoughts or questions about Project Aristotle and its findings, particularly if you disagree with anything I've said in this video, do let me know in the comments below. Bye. See you soon.